from their early life and their childhood and their upbringing, right? My first question is to Mr. Babel, and can you describe your childhood and probably some of the challenges of childhood which helped
and know more about life while you stay safe? Talk about childhood. I was part of a large family. My father was a police officer, an honest police officer, which to many is an oxymoron. I had very illustrious grandfathers. My Nana was finance chief of state of Mewar. Grandfather was a Nayab Hakim in the state of Mewar. And my father was a bank manager first. And then, somebody asked him to join police. An IPS officer asked him to join police, and he did that. He was a proud police officer. And as part of large family with limited income, I think my biggest influence was my mother, probably. She was a tremendous manager. And her one motto was get good education. There are a lot of times we had when we went for engineering, and with so many children, she sold some of her jewelry to give us education. So those are challenging times, but I learned from my mother how to conserve resources and have single purpose focus of what you want to do in life. And she always had a smile and managed the large family pretty well. So I learned a lot from her. The other influences I had in my early days was the schools I went to, and then eventually the university I went to. So I started with a convent school, and then I studied at Vidya Bhavan School, which was set up pre-independence and was set up on the lines of Shantiniketan and what BHU did. So Dr. Mohan Singh Mehta was a founder, and we have very vast campus. We were close to nature. I could operate a lathe machine at school. We studied a lot of stuff. We went camping, hiking. So a lot of fun we had. But there were a lot of challenges. But life was fun. I used to bike for almost 6-7 miles to go to my school, spend a lot of time playing, spend a lot of time in the library. So it's true all-round development that the school provided. So very happy memories of that. Challenges are same probably for everybody in that age. And I don't know about Mr. Dengaj, but most middle-class families, if they were large, had a typical challenge to manage such large with a limited amount of money. But, we worked together, and I learned a lot.
Thank you, sir. And Mr. Dengaj, can you also answer that, please? How did your childhood really influence what you were to, do in the future?
Oh, by the way, just let me add one more thing. The big influence I had 4 European teachers at school. So that was a tremendous influence as well to give you a global horizon of what the world is like and learn from them. And also learn the English language, which was not easy at that time. I studied at Hindi medium school, but those teachers did help you learn a language.
Mr. Dengaj, can you also put some insights into how your upbringing helped you through life and basically grow as an individual?
Yeah. Now, so I grew up in Nawalgarh, which is a part of Jhunjhunu district in Shekhawat region of Rajasthan. I was living with my uncle for almost 10 to 11 years till I moved to Bombay. And therefore, I had an upbringing which was slightly different than most of the people. But in those tough, the places, because the family was passing through many stressful moments, I was, I think, quite fearless. And therefore, I didn't used to get scared of any difficulties or challenges. Nawalgarh was a very prominent place at that point of time, because it had the distinction of producing the largest number of millionaires for a lack of population in the country. I mean, there were many, many industrialists that came from there. And that particular part had a good influence on me in terms of looking at the money making we were a lower middle class, or we were a, let's say, middle class family, but surrounded by many of the mansions and havelis of very rich people. That was the first thing. Second was that I was probably good. Fortunately, I was bright at studies, and I was sailing very well. After my grandmother expired, with whom I was living, I moved over to Bombay. Again, in Bombay, we were having, say, quite a normal, or I would say, middle class existence. But on the whole, I would say that I did not ever have any fear, any kind of an apprehension in facing challenges. Somehow or the other, I think there was a genetic element in me which prompted to challenge the convention, challenge what actually is right in front of you, and then come up with something that is going to be different. Second important thing that I was able to notice was from my grandfather, who was fairly unconventional in terms of his thinking. In those days, he used to be a drama writer, a playwright, as well as an actor. And in Marwadi community, an actor of the stage was considered to be something below their dignity. And therefore, I aligned more with my grandfather. He was unconventional, I was unconventional. So I think we did very well, and I got along very well with him. Lastly, I came to, as I said, Ahmedabad. I am Ahmedabad, and therein again the same streak and same, kind of a challenge, so very taught. I will not say that there was anything, say, very distinguished or anything that was different, in case of me. Most of the country, as you must know, in post-independence, was passing through very difficult times. And all of us, like Mr. Babel said, all of us were brought on something that was very scarce, whether it was water, which was scarce in Rajasthan, or it was food, or it was money, or it was resources. Everything had to be conserved and saved. Large families was the order of the day. Every family had 5 or 6 children. We were, for example, 6 brothers and sisters, and naturally, the parents, my father with the meager resources, or my uncle with meager resources, had difficulty in bringing us up. I only can say that hard times was a part and parcel of life, and we were taught to deal with the hard times in a very stoic manner, in a very peaceful manner, not to get deterred and not to get completely swept by them.
So you Mr. Dangayat, you graduated as the youngest MBA graduate even till date from IMA. How did that come about?
Well, as I said, I was endowed, say, with some probably intellect which helped me in finishing, 2 classes in twice. So I went to a teacher who gave me the orientation or the knowledge under a tree. I finished that, for 1 year, and I was straight away admitted with a double promotion in the 3rd standard. Then I went from Rajasthan to Bombay. In Rajasthan, I was in the 7th standard, but in Bombay, I was admitted in 9th standard after a simple kind of a test, which enabled the principal to understand that I had the necessary skill set and I had the necessary knowledge for moving on to the 9th. But let me also tell you, in Rajasthan in those days, matriculation meant 10th, and in Maharashtra, it meant 11th. So I was automatically eligible for that. But I got that particular double promotion while moving from Rajasthan or from Nawalgarh to Mumbai. I went for BSc. Normally, people that were in Group A, in those days, Group A used to be mathematics background. They went for engineering. But I was very young, and therefore I opted to go for Bachelor of Science, BSc. I cleared that. I didn't know anything about MBA for quite some time. But on prompting of some friends, I applied for it. I cleared it, and I was an MBA at the age of 19 years and something like 7 months, 19 years, 8 months. So under 20, I finished my PGDB or MBA from IIM Ahmedabad, and probably I am the youngest person to pass out from IIM.
Wow. I don't think we can imagine finishing anything by 19 years of age these days, but well, you finish the MBA from IMA at that age, and that is amazing. Mr. Babel, can you walk us through how exactly did Secure Meters come about, and how did you actually land up with the company and become the first employee of a company which did not even exist probably till you joined?
I was working with a large organization in Calcutta, and the Secure Meters story is the story of the single family. I just happened to be the first employee, but the vision came out of late Mr. P.P. Singhal and then his 3 sons. So I was traveling with Mr. Salil Singhal, who then became chairman of PI. So in that journey, I learned a lot about what the group was about. So we were on the same flight from Calcutta to Delhi and then Delhi to Udaipur. And that gave me a lot of insights into what the philosophy was. Then the family was into computers. Those days you had EDP centers, electronic data processing centers. So one of the family members did electricity billing for the state of UP. And one of the chairman told one of the Singhal brothers that, why don't you guys, you understand technology? Why don't you do something about technology that can help us prevent temper? And Sanjay, with whom I worked more than 3 decades, looked around. And in England, he found a technology being developed. It's just sheer luck that I also knew those days you didn't have internet, you didn't have any access. You had to book a trunk call to talk to people to other cities, So I met Sanjay on one of my trips. I was flying to Calcutta via Bombay. A meeting which was supposed to last 15 minutes lasted 2 hours. And I could see that the technology he was talking about, the approach he was talking about, can transform the electricity sector. And I'll tell you how I knew about the electricity sector. I worked for Hindalco. And at that time, Hindalco was fighting a litigation with the state of UP. I could see the vision of G.D. Babu, late G.D. Birla, where he had set up a captive power plant when electricity was available on a contract for 10 paisa per unit for 25 years. And he set up a plant saying, and he wrote, I've seen his handwritten note, that the government won't be able to honor their contract. So have your own power plant. You can't run a aluminum plant without uninterrupted power. So those days, the electricity, they used to produce at 25 paisa when the contract was 10 paisa. When I joined, we were producing electricity at about 40 paisa, and we're buying at 80 paisa from UP government. So I learned about what the demand was going to be, and I thought it was a good idea. Ahmedabad was I when Sanjay offered me a job, I took it up.
So
a very amusing part.
But Secure Meters did not exist at that point in time.
It didn't exist. We were starting this as a concept. I had a very good job as a senior person in a larger company. And I took up a job. I didn't even bother about what the salary was. I took a pay cut those days. It was difficult to manage a young family of 2 people, but my wife fully supported me in whatever I did in life. It still does. So we moved to Udaipur with a young family. I didn't know what, it isn't about what you earn. वो 2 फलसफे मैंने सीखे हैं हिंदी में. जो प्राप्त है वो पर्याप्त है और जो शेष है वो विशेष है. So, she said, we'll manage in whatever you earn, but if you're happy doing this, then I'll fully support you. Wow. So we started with a computer and a desk, right? But the thing we did, and I guess, having spoken to Mr. Dangach, that's probably the story of Syntex as well. We researched the market absolutely in detail, both national and international. So Ahmedabad was our first customer. Mr. Pai used to be the director there. And then there was Mr. Panchal, who was the metering manager.
was AEC, the current Ahmedabad.
AEC, yes, this was Ahmedabad Electricity Company.
Now we know it now we know it as, I think, Torrent Power. Now it is Torrent Power.
That's right. And those days, I don't know what the situation now is. It was the world's capital for electricity theft.
Okay.
The most sophisticated theft techniques used to come out of Ahmedabad. And we research a great deal. Some of us will pose as possible investors in trying to set up industry in Ahmedabad. And this mafia will get in touch with us and we'll figure out what they did. So figured out about 56 different methods of tampering with an electricity meter, with a mechanical meter, because there were no electronic meters. Mr. Pai, we told him that what technology can do, and he said, okay, you have the first order of 5 meters, give me 5 meters. And that's how it started.
Your first order was for 1 meter or for 5 meters? I think
it was 5 meters. We supplied 1, and then we supplied 5.
Okay.
But it did very well. And then he wanted to place order for 10 meters. So I went with a blank checkbook and told Mr. Pai that you can have the money back that we supplied the first one for 10,000 rupees. The next 10 we supplied was at 40,000 rupees each. Okay. And when I gave the quote, Mr. Pai said, you must be crazy. I said, look, I've made a mistake. 10,000 rupees, we can't afford you. We can't sustain the research that we're doing. We need to fund our research. But I can assure you that if you use the technology, you'll earn 10 times over within a few months. And I said, don't pay me if you don't earn back. Don't buy more. So, spend a percentage of whatever you save on buying meters. And he asked me to leave the room.
Sorry to interject, but till this time, all the meters were coming from the UK, or the technology was coming.
They were coming from Switzerland, from Landis+Gyr and other GEC and other good meters. The quality of meters being produced in India was pretty poor.
So you were essentially bringing all these meters from UK at that point in time, or
first few meters came from England, and the guy who designed the meter was a great inventor. But as I said, Mr. Singhal had a great vision in researching into this, and we worked pretty well. Now, one of the lessons that which probably holds true today is the idea was to develop the technology locally. So you can get a core idea from overseas, but then develop. So we developed a good R&D team within India. So we had a chap called Yadav, who unfortunately died later in a road accident. He was a Pilani gold medalist, BITS Pilani gold medalist. Came from a village which probably till today doesn't have a motorable road. So we developed technology which is suitable for Indian conditions, and then grew from computer desk to a large organization.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Dangayat, I would like you to share how your opportunity, or not opportunity, but your interaction with Syntex came about, and how you landed a job with Syntex in the first place. Can you share about the interview, please?
Yes. Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes. You know what? IIM placement was generally on the campus. I went for interview in Asian Paints at IIM, which was meant only for engineers plus MBAs, not for non-engineers. But I dared, because I thought, what is the harm in trying out, say, one's luck. I went to then the first question that was posed by then General Manager of Asian Paints, Dangayat, you are not an engineer. How come you have appeared for this interview? So I said, engineers are not the only ones that have got brains. Non-engineers got brains. The second question was, Dangayat, you are a Marwadi, and we know very well that Marwadis always go for business. I said, you are probably misreading all Marwadis in the same kind of bucket. I don't worship money. I am unlike most Marwadis, and therefore you'll be safe with me. And I got the job. I don't know, what kind of impact did I make on him? But I think, my age, my, straightforward answers impressed him, and he took me on. I joined Asian Paints, but I found it to be a very, you can say, straight-jacketed company, and I was not comfortable. Bharat Vijay Mills in those days was looking for an MBA to work over there. Mr. Dinesh Patel, the managing director then, was living next to IIM and wanted to have a graduate, because he had heard a lot about IIM graduates being the change agents. He was, in the process of setting up plastics and chemicals division. And the ad for inviting an MBA from IIM Ahmedabad was there on the board for around a year and a half to 2 years, but nobody went. I was not looking for a change, so I kind of, sent an application. And within a few days, I got the interview call. I went over there. Mr. Dinesh Patel was there to interview me. And he asked me general questions. Those general questions like, what's your name? What's your father's name? What is your age? All those other questions over. And then he said, which college did you go to? And I said, sir, I went to Jain College in Bombay. Achhu kehwanu, I Jain College mein tu. And the interview was over and I was absorbed and I was taken over. The offer was made, which I accepted. After maybe maybe discussions. And that's a way I was employed by Bharat Vijay Mills. They were very happy that an MBA from Ahmedabad was willing to join. Another thing, that I said to Dinesh Bhai Patel at that time, I remember, was that in Asian Paints, I was having a major issue of getting decent lunch. For 2 years, I said I have been without a lunch at Asian Paints. So I would like to know what exactly is a kind of an arrangement for lunch. And he said, "Arey bhai, hame par lunch kariye. We are also having lunch. Hum log bhi to yahan khate hain. So yahan par lunch ka intezam ho jayega." I said, "I would like to have a hygienic and a decent lunch. That is, the only condition." He agreed, and he naturally, on the day of my joining, called his Maharaj and told him that, this particular gentleman has to be given lunch. For 2, 3, 4 days, I had that lunch, and then I again went to Mr. Patel, and I told him this lunch is not acceptable. Then he said, "Why don't you have lunch with us only?" And that is how I think, I continued to work there for 43 years, and I had lunch over there with them. So, interview.
Your only condition beyond a decent salary was
basically to ensure that there is at least a decent lunch. After all this, if you have been working over there, you don't want to remain with the staff for the whole day.
So I mean, when I hear these things, I feel that many things were simpler probably many years back. And I am graduate asking for a lunch. I mean, it's amazing. I think today most of us ask for ESOPs or ownership in the companies. But both of you did fairly unique or went into what I'll say are fairly unique products. So, Mr. Dangayat, first of all, how difficult was it to get into the water tanks business, because this product category did not exist till that time? And how did you scale it up?
Well, as you know, any new concept, any new idea, any new product is going to face enormous amount of challenges. Whether it was yesterday, it is today, or it is tomorrow. It was indeed very hard to introduce a new concept in the market. Let me tell you that when I joined the Bharat Vijay Mills Limited, the plastic division was called Sinterplast Containers. By the process of sintering, it was supposed to be making containers, and therefore the name was Sinterplast Containers. And we did not start with the water tanks, by the way. We started off, to be very frank with you, started off with some industrial containers, especially card cans, which were there in the textile industry as a matter for holding the sliver in the spinning part. Everybody who has seen the textile mill will know card can is a can which is supposed to be holding the cotton sliver. So this particular Sinterplast containers, as a matter of fact, was an offshoot, or it was kind of a project that was designed to make card cans. Believe me or not, we did not succeed in the card cans. We succeeded in some other industrial containers and their own water tanks. But in each and every segment, there were big challenges. For example, we made these industrial containers and tanks, which were supposed to be very expensive as compared to the conventional ones. I remember that we took the risk of advertising in a big way in the beginning, because it was having the backing of the Bharat Vijay Mills Limited. The desire was to make a flash, and the first ad that we had released in front pages of all the leading newspapers in the country was, "This is a think tank." And then after that, we started building on it. And in 2-3 years' time, we captured the market for the industrial containers. Water tank came later. We wanted to expand into that particular business, that is in the containers, and we thought the water tanks could possibly give us a good break. But it is a big, long story. I would not like to spend much time. It was indeed very tough. The market survey said that plastic tanks don't have any kind of potential because of the cost. It was 4 times more expensive than the bricks or RCC tanks. It was probably 3 times more expensive steel tanks. It didn't have any approvals. And altogether new product, from all the angles it was new, and it took many, many years. I will only like to tell you about the approval in Bombay Municipal Corporation. Something that the people don't know of, that Bombay Municipal Corporation had a hydraulic engineering department, and anything that was used for water had to be approved by the hydraulic engineering department. Hydraulic engineer was a very slimy and a very difficult the person. And I remember going and sitting over there in the office of Bombay Municipal Corporation for not less than 35 days. It used to last for around 6 hours, and convincing him why should plastic tanks be approved for use in Bombay Municipal Corporation. I used to take a novel with me, I remember, and you sit and read over there. The hydraulic engineering chief would call me at around 12 o'clock in the morning or afternoon and will not see me till 5:30. But I was having the patience, I was having the perseverance, and I succeeded after a lot of I would say other things that I had to do with respect to him. But we got the approval. Once we got maybe that green signal, it also gave us a protection for 5 years. Nobody could go through this kind of a drill. Nobody could go through this kind of a grind in Bombay Municipal Corporation. For many years we had the monopoly. So I would like to tell you that when you are having a difficulty in making something successful, your competitors are also going to have a lot of difficulties. Sometimes the license Raj, as they may be called, used to be good for the people who got the license, people who got the permission, but it's difficult for other people.
Oh. I heard a similar interaction of Mr. Babel with, I think, another government official, where he was made to wait for about 8 hours. But I will not hit upon that. Mr. Babel, I think what the audience may not know, and I'll just go into a little bit about it, is that just for the audience, that Secure Meters was buying technology from PRI in UK for a long time, and after I think 5 to 6 years, sir, please correct me if I'm wrong, Secure Meters bought or invested into PRI, so they went backward, and actually this small Indian company invested into a UK-based company, and then turned it around. So Babel sir, I think that kind of gut, that kind of I would say the strength to trust your instincts, to buy into a company from whom you've been purchasing. How did that come about? How did you actually go about investing into this company where you're buying from?
Karan, I'm just looking at the time, and I'll try and answer in a way that is relevant in today's context.
Correct.
Because otherwise the audience may get a little bored in hearing story about one particular thing. Couple of things, and I'm picking up from what Mr. Dangait said. I think the core thing about any business is what is the customer problem you're trying to solve and how you're trying to do it. Right. So identifying the need, a stated need or a perceived need of the customer, and what is the means that you do it. So in our case, the stated and perceived need was revenue protection, that the utilities, our customers, should be paid for what they supply. And the end user, who is our key goal, should pay a fair amount of what he or she is using. So, and technology, we said we will have the best technology in the world. And we'll try and create something which is world-class. Now, this is again, the group's philosophy comes in, and that of the founder of the group, that do whatever you do in the area, try and become the best in the world. So create a team and do that. So when we started developing products in India, we picked up the most challenging customers. So we had what we call ABCD strategy of entry: Ahmedabad, Bombay, Calcutta, Delhi. Ahmedabad, Bombay, Calcutta because they were privately owned, very demanding, very knowledgeable customers. Delhi because that was a worst performing utility. The losses were about 60 65% T&D losses, or the distribution losses mainly. And it was mainly theft. So when we succeeded with that in India, and then the way we're supporting, we put engineers everywhere to support the local customers using high technology compared to what mechanical meters did. And when we succeeded that, and then we found those were the days when a lot of international companies were trying to enter the Indian market. And all the business that we've done in the group, you have a strategy that you prepare for 5 years. Every alternate year, you sit down and prepare a strategy for next 5 years.
Right.
Okay. So what you do in the strategy is you do what we call steer, look at the societal changes, the technological changes, the environmental, economy, and regulatory. Do a SWOT, what are your strengths and weaknesses, what are the opportunities and threats in the market. And when we found that a lot of international companies are coming to India and that they can pose a challenge, we said, we want to be world-class, so why can't we take on the large companies in their own markets? And this was very ambitious. The group wasn't very large at that time, but the owners took the challenge. And one of the things that I'll suggest here is, and which should be true now, is the involvement of the employees that the owners had. So everybody who worked with a group, the owners involved them in decision making. So I never felt that I was an employee. In fact, for quite many years, a lot of people in the market thought that I have some shareholding in the company. That's the kind of freedom which was given by the Singles to me. So when we looked at it, there was an opportunity to invest into PRI. And first we took a minority stake. That's when I moved. I was sent to England to run that business. And we turned that business around. It was loss-making business. We turned it around. So what used to cost, we used to make meters in England at that time, used to cost us £175 to build. So we looked at this and we said, why can't we make in India and make it world-class? So we set up a factory here to make world-class. We invited our overseas customer, gave them an option. You can buy a make in England product or buy make in India. And 100% of the guys who visited said, even if this was more expensive in India, we would have bought it from India. To cut the long story short, we started selling products in £75 and started making more money. Right?
Right.
The team in England started believing in the Indian ownership. First they thought these guys have come from India, they'll probably close it down. What are you guys doing here? But then we became a team. So I think the message here is it was a difficult time when you're losing money and when you acquire a business in overseas, meter bahut tej bhagta hai kharche ka. Right? So you got to be careful how you amalgamate the culture within your own organization. What are the key things you address?
So you were actually at the helm at that time. What are the two learnings, if you can share with us from that?
So clarity of thought of what you're trying to do, and value optimization for the customer, cost optimization everybody talks about, but give the value as well. So if you don't have a value, if you don't have sales, then cost optimization alone doesn't help. Okay. So how do you operate when you have resource constraint is the big learning that we had. And how do you work as a team together, right from top down to the most person in the organization. So me and Mr. Singhal would go on the weekend and test meters ourselves. We would operate machines ourselves. And when the guys will come, some of the technicians next day, they'll be surprised at how these products were tested, and would say, we came on the weekend and did it. And to cut the long story short, we've had times when some of these English colleagues of ours came over during Christmas break and worked for what was to be delivered to the customer. So very difficult times, very challenging times.
All this time, Secure Meters never went public. They never. I think your sister company went public, PI Industries. But why did Secure Meters never actually? It is still closely held, correct?
Yes, it is. And the reason is simple. Mr. Sanjay Singhal always mentioned this, that मैं पैसे क्यों उठाऊंगा? By the way, in my belief, which he shared with me, and I also agree with him, the most expensive form of funding your business is equity.
Correct.
To service equity is the most expensive thing in business. So, he said, I will only raise funds if I can't self-finance it.
And I think
तो अभी तक तो जो भी किया है उसके लिए self funding possible थी. So one of the things, the measures for the business were, what is the return on investment that we get, what is the free cash flow that we get. That's how we used to measure the business, right? And how many new products did we sell, what markets, what geographies did we go to. Those are things which are relevant even today, of what you're doing, how do you retain customers, how do you build relationships. Those are things that we managed well, and we could manage with the income we had. One of the things that we went abroad also was related to cash flow, and this is relevant today, is we realized when you're dealing with electricity boards in India, you don't get paid in time.
absolutely.
Right? You have the L1 culture of placement of order. So we realized in those days that if we want to grow our business and we want to sleep well in the night, we must get our money back, because there's no point in selling a product and you're not getting paid, or you're getting paid after 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. So we decided in our strategy that we must have a fair overseas business, and we grew that business. So we produced at a sensible cost in India, a very cost competitive thing, a world-class quality, and sold it to customers who will pay in time. And a lot of our customers globally were single source and still are single source and secure.
I think Sintex's experience was a little different. So, Mr. Dengaj, I think there was a private equity investment into the company, and can you share how that went and your views on the same? I think Sintex was the first company to be invested into via the private equity route, probably in India.
Not exactly. Maybe it was the second or third company.
Okay.
Bharat Vijay Mills Limited had two divisions: textiles and plastics. So in 90s, plastics was doing very well and textiles was not doing well. And as a group, as a company, Bharat Vijay Mills Limited was, having several issues on the finances. But that was also the time when the economy was opening up and people like George Soros and others had come and set up their own private equity arms. So there was this Indo-Ocean, which was, as a matter of fact, supported by George Soros. It approached Sintex through, some intermediaries to kind of view a private equity investment. I was running the plastics business, and I still remember talking to the private equity guys, the venture fund guys, as to why did they want to invest into a company that is already, several decades old. After all, that means it's like a portfolio investment. It is not a venture capital. Venture capital, to my mind, has always been the risk capital. And many people call it the vulture capital in many parts of the world. So I was, all the while asking this particular VC firm, Indo-Ocean, as to why they were interested. And to my surprise, they were clear that they wanted to have a return of around 30 to 40% year on year, and they wanted to exit after 3 years. So that became another reason for I do not subscribe to this thinking, because such returns are not possible. It's only by, possibly enhancing the perception and the valuation in the share market can you get this. But this is what possibly was their motivation. Eventually they invested. I became one of the promoters while signing these documents, though I did not subscribe to their thinking. And what I found was that VC firms at that time and VC firms today are really not committed for a long-term association with the company. They have got a span of around 3 or 5 years. Most of the people who are coming here on behalf of the VC or the PE firms are employees who are there on bonus, on XYZ. They come, they have, got a kind of a roadmap or a calendar. You invest, say 100, you exit, after 2, 3 years or 4 years, and you possibly, they try to take 300. So while doing this kind of an extra growth in the valuation, there are many practices which are not easily acceptable to many people like us. So became their attitude, their approach, and then their pressure to get to areas which you normally organically not like to get into was always a cause of friction. So if you are looking at the VC or the PE firm, that's a very different format. And as Mr. Babil just now said, equity sometimes turns out to be the most expensive way to finance. Because it is not only the interest, or it is not only something, or it is not only, the kind of, the thing that you have to pay to them. but you may lose your independence, you may lose your autonomy, and you may lose your respect, because venture capitalists, by and large, are very short-term guys. They are coming on board. They are not, they may be pushing you, flogging you, and for them, an investee firm is more or less like a commodity. They have taken a commodity, made it valuable, and then now to hook it off to somebody else who will come and make higher bidding. So this was my experience. In Syntex, we had first Indocean. After that, we had the Warburg Pincus. After that, we had somebody else. One after the other, different people have been there in the Syntex's VC or the PE or the other kinds of funding. Well, experiences are mixed for other people, but my own observation is that if you are modest in conservative, say in kind of your thinking, it may sometimes help you rather than say thinking very big and falling a prey to such attractive propositions.
Mr. Babel, whenever, before asking the next question or at least stating something, for the audience, I would request that you post questions on the Q&A box, which is there, so that we can ask those questions at the end of the session. Mr. Babel, one of the things that I constantly read about you is that you were brilliant in managing and creating teams. So as young people, most of us over here are building our companies at various stages. What was your secret to building great teams and really managing them?
I also see a question by Mr. Pathak.
Yeah, you want to take that now or at the end?
Yeah, but I'll probably cover in answering both the questions that you asked and he asked.
Great, thank you.
I think I always believe the world belongs to young people. Whether you're by age young or in your thinking you're young. By young means enterprising. I think, I've always believed you can build good teams if you trust, you communicate. So you share the vision. So I've always worked with people, and my story with Secure has been no different. Even when I was president of IEMA, Indian Electrical and Electronics Manufacturing Association, one of the things that we tried to do was create a communication. What is that we're trying to do?
Correct.
Right? Whether I treat my children or I treat my team or anybody else, transparency. Right? In today's time also, that is what is required. What organizations and your team needs is they feel insecure today, what the future holds for us. So communicate what is that as an organization, as a team you're trying to do. And then give role clarity. What do you expect from people? Also take the feedback and, depending on how many people you can involve as many as you can. Sometimes you can't involve too many, but involve and formulate your strategies and what is that you're trying to do, and communicate with people and allow people, it's not important where the idea comes from. It is more important how the idea fructifies, how does it get eventually and sees a good result. And once somebody's idea succeeds, you can understand. I see the question that पैसा नहीं देंगे आजकल का लोग पैसा चाहते हैं. I don't quite believe. What you try to create is wealth. अभी जितना पैसा लेके हम लोग बैठे हुए हैं, मैंने शायद आज 2 महीने के बाद में ट्राउजर पहना है. Right. So when I was opening my wardrobe and looked at the 60 odd trousers hanging there, I was feeling ashamed of myself. Why did I accumulate all this?
Correct, sir.
Right. So, and I'll tell you, look at business families. Right. जिसके पास 100 करोड़, 200 करोड़, 500 करोड़ रुपया है, वो भी वही गेहूं का रोटी खाता है. Right. They're trying to create wealth. So the employee realizes what he needs. Often the problem is we don't realize what is that we're trying to create. What gives us happiness? What gives us satisfaction? And if you can make that individual objective and the organizational objective congruent, bring about congruency, give them a career path, help them build their career path, and align that with the organization, then you create a great team and a great organization. And I've been lucky that wherever I work, and also the bosses I've had, has allowed me to do that, and the team that I've had. So, when you said you help create the brand, it wasn't me. It was my leader and the team that we had. We did it together. So it is we which is important in a team. And if you give that feeling, whether it's difficult time, not so difficult time, so, a good leader would be the success is that of the team, the failure is that of the leader. If you're the leader, then you shoulder the failure.
I think that is phenomenal advice within a few minutes for all of us, and thank you for that. Mr. Dangaj, I think we as business people, or even if we are not in business, we are all shaped by many experiences that we have, even outside of business. So I think there was a particularly tough situation which probably shaped you, and wanted to share your learnings from that, and that was 26/11, if I'm not wrong.
26/11.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a very interesting thing. I was attending in Indo-Korean function there in Taj. After it was over, we came to know that there were some problems in the Taj area, and that we had to be confined to the banquet hall that was there, I think, on some 20th or 23rd floor or something. And well, it emerged that there was a terrorist attack, and then all the people had to probably be there. I must tell you that I have been fairly equanimous in my thinking. I've been more or less like a fakir in my thinking. I have been involved with the health sector. I've been involved, with reading on it, and I have always believed that death and disease are not interconnected, and that has given me something which probably many people don't have an orientation of. But in that particular hall, I was one of probably the coolest chaps sitting around. I did not telephone to my wife, and when I got a call from her, which she probably made after learning from others that I could be there, I told her that there's nothing to worry. If God wills, I will be able to come. There's nothing pending for me. As I told you, death and disease connection is such that you will be probably ending your life without having the disease. A healthy person can also die. So I said, if my death is destined now, let it happen. There's nothing pending in the world, and that's how I kept on maybe enjoying myself. I was having maybe drink. I was having maybe nashta and food, all that was served by Taj. And when the announcement was made that there is a possibility that from the fire escape route we can go down, I was the first person to say that I'm prepared to take that risk and move down. If my end has to come, let it come. So fortunately, I was able to come. But this 26/11 experience is something which verified and validated my thinking that you need not get deterred by any hardship, any such eventuality. And therefore, I am possibly not suggesting that everybody can be like that, but I am made that way. And therefore, in the harshest and the most difficult situations also, I am in a position to remain fairly balanced and fairly in the center.
So just for the record, I think Mr. Dangaj then exited via the back door, and I think he was I think down by about 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock at night.
No, 4 o'clock in the morning.
4 o'clock in the morning, and some of us were on the phone with the driver, and we were quite relieved. Actually, none of us were here. My brother and I were not here. Only mom was here at that point in time in India. My question, and I have only two more questions before we move into the audience questions. And I would again request the audience to post your questions on the Q&A box. What lies in store for these adopted children, which I say are the companies in the future. So, Mr. And how can you detach from something that you have put your blood, sweat, and tears into? So, Mr. Babel, you've grown the company or to a certain level. How do you detach from it and kind of carry on with your life with other things?
So very simple. I have a model about career, and probably that will go true for businesses as well, and probably more relevant in today's context. So I plan myself for 3 years and 6 years, and I believe that two forces which help you go ahead. One is what you do. What is in your means. So if I want to go from A to B, I decide what is that point B. Often in life, both businesses and individuals don't know where they're trying to go, and they keep blaming the circumstances. So one is that what you do, other is the external factor. So what COVID is an negative external factor, right? So if somebody's married a billionaire's daughter by accident and he inherits the billions, he becomes a billionaire. But probability of that happening is rare. Probably 1 in a billion. But you have to monitor external factors, right? When you get into a business, you got to monitor that. Individually, for your career, you need to monitor that. So I'd plan what I want to do when I want to retire. So I would talk to Mr. Singhal Mr. Sanjay Singhal about what I want to do, and he said, wait. But then I realized if I put myself into his position, he would look at a succession plan. Right. So I was preparing a team who could take over from me. And I had 3 options of that available. But before that, I also knew what I was trying to do. So at that time, I was active in EMA and I'd become president. So I detached myself from the job. So I was working for the company, but I would let those 3 guys run the meetings. I would sit in there, but would not make a comment. I'll just observe. And I would see, which one has got what skill set, and I could see the succession happening successfully. And I'm Jain by birth, so whatever little philosophy I've read of Hinduism and Jainism is, a detachment is vitragi hona thoda jaruri hota hai जीवन में. तो vitrag मेरे ख्याल से काफी हिंदुस्तान में होता है. So you detach yourself because if you love something, it's like my children, when I was leaving England, they asked me, what do you want us to do? I said, what is that you want to do? So my daughter asked me that question. I said, what is that you want to do? So my wife was a little anxious. How can you leave a young girl on her own in England, living in London on her own? And when we now see her doing what she does, she did the right decision, and we're glad that she took that decision. We're very proud of that. Similarly, when I see the team, what they're doing phenomenal. Similarly, Mr. Singhal took a step back, and his 2 sons are running it very well. They're taking it to the next level. So, as I said earlier, younger people can do wonderful things. You need to detach yourself and figure out what is that you want to do. Because nobody is indispensable in life.
Correct.
Right? Yeah. And the other thing is, I must find, like Mr. Dangach has seen, and I'm always inspired by what he does. So whenever I met him, he hasn't talked about Syntex. He's talked about his other activities, whether it is renewable energy or something else he wants to do, and you start giving back to the society. So that's one of the reasons I came back to India, that it was difficult to leave our children and grandchildren behind in England and come back here, but we wanted to give back to the society. So, getting involved with the industry association, getting involved with some of the NGOs, with Udaipur Urja, and trying to give back, because if God has been kind and has given you opportunity, it's your absolute duty that you do that. And then you can detach yourself.
Correct.
क्योंकि आप अगर बहुत ज्यादा चिंता करोगे और इंटरफियर करोगे तो ना तो उनको अपना काम करने दोगे ना खुद का काम करोगे. So it's important for people to get detached and move on in life. And they're in very capable hands. They've taken it to the next level. And the other thing which you realize after leaving is what mistakes you made, what you shouldn't have done, and you were part of the problem. तो वो एक बहुत बड़ी सीख होती है जीवन में कि बच्चों के साथ क्या गलत किया. When I now spend time with my granddaughter and see my children bringing up my grandchildren, I see what mistakes I made with my children of not giving enough time. I try to make up, probably, talking to them more regularly now. बट वो जो समय निकल गया, पर वो गलती से सीख सकते हैं.
Mr. Nangach, so what is getting you out of bed every morning these days, and what are you busy with? So it's a two-pronged question. So what are you busy with right now? And second is that we feel that probably the company may have misstepped a bit on some counts. So what would be your advice now to the company, to Sintex?
To be very frank with you, I retired 3 years back, and believe me or not, I'm completely retired and detached. As it is, inherently, I'm a fairly detached person. As I told you just now, I do not get very easily attached to anything. So while I was at Sintex, that is going back to something like 7-8 years, I thought of starting an India-centric thinking plus action platform. Thinking alone is not enough. You can have an India-centric thinking, or you could have westernized thinking. But if you do not convert all your thoughts and all the ideas that are coming into some sort of viable projects, it is not going to be of much utility to anybody. So, Innovative Thought Forum was created. It is an India-centric thinking plus action platform in which we are having deliberations, and then from that, a few projects are required to be taken further for implementation in a small way, which satisfy a 5S framework. This 5S framework is something which I conceived and which I have been trying to do: simple, smart, sensible, sustainable, and scalable or spreadable. So ideas that fit into this kind of framework are the ones which will be implemented. So that's the first thing that I've been busy with for the last few years. After maybe the onset of COVID-19, I have been now giving a lot more time and weight to my other passion, which is homeopathy. I have been a believer in holistic healthcare, and I have been more or less an evangelist or pracharak of homeopathy. And I've been thinking that homeopathy and Ayurveda can have the answer. So I've been interacting with a lot of people. We had 2 webinars. The first webinar was on vaccines, past, present, and future, which clearly showed that vaccine is around 18 to 24 months away, and therefore we need not keep on waiting for it. The second webinar that we had was on 14th of May, and that particular webinar was pragmatic ways to manage and live with coronavirus. Many interesting outcomes have come from that, which are now being shared, and many of them will be, I think, getting implemented. So I'm trying to to implement quite a few things which are concerning coronavirus, or prior to that, many of the things in renewable energy, waste management, and things like that. Last but not the least, waste management is something which is very close to my heart, and I've been organizing a series of webinars, or not webinars, seminars and discussions and projects around that. So I think very satisfied. I'm reasonably busy. I'm able to work at my pace, and I'm in a position to give full value or full satisfaction to the 4 purusharths that we all are supposed to be undertaking in this life, which is the dharma, arth, kam, and moksha. We have had the first 3. Now it is a question of the semi-renunciation, semi-detachment, and giving it back to the society and living in a detached manner.
I think we can open up the floor to questions from the audience. I would request everybody to post on the Q&A. We have already got a lot of questions, so we'll be trying to run through some of them because we also have 18 minutes to go. I think the first question which I would give that, or I would ask that to Babel sir is, what guidance would you give to young parents of today? Our children are going through an experience which could be partially like some challenges of earlier times, and also unique in many ways.
Well, I think I see my own children. I learn from them. I think spending time and be communicative with them, you'll certainly find facets of your own children which you didn't have time to look at. When I see my grandchildren, they create phenomenal things. So I have a 5-year-old grandson who made a robot and was explaining to his classmates and teacher what that robot can do. And the knowledge of mechatronics that he developed at the age of 5, and his parents helping, that was phenomenal. I have a 3-year-old granddaughter, my daughter's daughter, who I saw paint and create sculptures, which I couldn't believe that she can do. She narrates a story. She can build up stories from whatever theme you give. I have a granddaughter who's 10 years old, and now she suddenly started communicating with me, and you can relate to what you're trying to do. They want to know more about you. So things that we didn't do earlier that give time because we're so busy with our daily routines. And this I learned from my own children, how they treat my grandchildren. So I think be transparent with your children, give them confidence. You don't have to scare them. One of the things that, when you confine young children to a small space, it's a problem. So whenever you get opportunity and the local laws allow you, take them out. Take them to in a safe manner to the space that you can do. Use of technology in an appropriate way, because if you had restrictions earlier in using computers, I guess we could realize now that it'll become integral part of our lives. So use it judiciously and develop that trust that that tool is not misutilized. And observe carefully as to what interests your children have and support them with that. Allow them to spend time with their friends, because they'll get bored of you because they keep seeing you for 15, 20 hours a day. It can be challenging. So how do they communicate of people their age? I think one of the challenges is, the audience that I'm talking to is probably privileged and have access to digital technology. But I also think about children who don't have easy access to digital technology. So some of us should work on that front in providing digital technology to less privileged children. That'll be good.
The next question is for Mr. Dangayaj. So it comes from, we don't have names here, but the question is about you joined a company which was obviously not your own. So how difficult was it to convince the promoters with your ideas, and how did you do that?
I personally think it's a question of trust and confidence. Within the first 2 months, the trust was built with Mr. Dinesh Patel, Mr. Arun Patel and me. And after that, I was like my own master. I was like an entrepreneur and into business. And then at Syntex, we probably had the distinction of introducing not less than 15 new products or new product categories in the country as a whole. Water tank is only one, but there were many. We succeeded in some, we failed in some. For example, we were the first ones to come up with, PVC windows. We were the first ones, and I struggled and I worked very, very hard for around, the 5 years. We were the first ones to make FRP ladders. But these are the products which we could not succeed. So we tried quite a bit. I had free hand. I was like an entrepreneur, and that's how, even in, Rashmi Bansal's, say, book, probably, sense of ownership is the title of my story. So that is something, which kept me very happy, because it synced very well. It kind of gelled very well with my overall philosophy of life. I must tell you that I have been working with the motto, which is Yoga Karmastu Kaushalam. Whatever has been given in that particular place, you try to do your best. So that is something that I've been doing. Another thing, that has kept me going is not to kind of expect results straight away in proportion to the efforts. And that kind of a detachment, which is, you may say, kind of philosophy that is already there in many of our scriptures, or Gita and maybe the other places, is something that has kept me very happy, and it has kept me going. So I guess a proper balance. I'd like to also tell you, and I would also like to maybe share with you, that money is not the only aspiration. we are probably judging everything by the so-called wealth creation and so-called wealth attainment. I'm not driven by that. I'm just not driven by only money. There has to be something more than the money. There has to be something which has to be meaningful to to the society at large, and which has to be say valuable to me. And last but not the least, I must tell you that the entire capitalism that you are seeing, the burst of capitalism last 25 years to 50 years is all about making more and more profit. Capitalism is pure profit without any ethics, without any consideration to ecology, without any consideration to environment, and without any consideration to equity. I am not say the one which is driven by that. I go by our Indian ethos, which is not Shuddha Labh. Indian ethos, Indian philosophy, Shubh Labh. You must make money, but that particular wealth creation should be win-win for every single stakeholder. The moment you think of Shubh Labh, then your orientation will change altogether. You will not look like, say maybe, say some of these megalomaniacs who want to make very large mansions, who want to have the fancy cars, who want to drive, maybe around, say in planes. Not that. I personally think a new economic order has to emerge in this world, which is to be predicated, which is to be built around Shubh Labh. I've been a believer of Shubh Labh from very, very early.
Oh, Shubh Labh, right? So that is SHUBH LABH.
Yeah, I would like
wrong.
Shubh Labh. Shubh Labh.
I liked what
it's unfortunate that we, having been trained in say in the Western languages and Western say kind of value system, have failed to ask ourselves this question: what is the meaning of Shubh Labh? Ask yourself that meaning, you'll get the answers.
Okay.
So there is. I'd like to add to that, Karan.
Yes.
In our scriptures, there's a shloka: Vidya dadati vinayam, vinayati ati patratam, patrata dhanmapnoti, dhana dharmam tata sukham. That means knowledge, capability, create wealth, and then happiness and humility. So that is the path that our Shastras say. So create wealth, or Shubh Labh, but that is a process by which you create wealth. Knowledge, capability, humility, wealth, and happiness.
Correct.
I would like to add, to what Babalji said. Chanakya, he says that ultimate aim that all of us have is the happiness. Ultimate aim is happiness. Ultimate is not money. So Sukhasya Moolam Dharmam. And again, Sukhasya Moolam Dharmam. Dharmasya Moolam Artham. So dharma is ethical living. It is not a kind of the righteous living, the rightful living. That is what is there ingrained in our philosophy, and that is something which I strongly believe in, and I would like to advise that you should also think about it.
Karan, we may have questions directly COVID related or business.
Yes, I have one question to you, Babel sir, and that is that. In these times, you constantly get a lot of advice, and half of the people are saying that you hold on, whereas this is regarding businesses. So half of the people are saying wait and watch, and half of the people are talking about, well, opportunity lies in times of in tough times. So what should and how should an entrepreneur really evaluate and analyze and move ahead after the COVID crisis?
Oh my God! Did somebody said wait and watch?
Yeah, somebody said wait and watch.
If you wait, then you're dead. Wait, bahut badh jayega. No. Watch by all means, but this is the time really to start acting upon what you need to do.
Correct.
Right? Because things are changing every day. Because if you wait, your competitor isn't waiting. He's watching and he's acting.
Yes.
So, few things that I would say. Everybody's talked about cash flows and cash conservation. So one must do that. We need to look at, value optimization that you can create quickly for your customers. And every business should look at that. We must look at what best incremental returns you can get to mitigate your cash things. You must look at short-term emergencies of the businesses and address them, because if you don't do that, then your operation may be successful and a patient may be dead by by the time you solve the problem. So you've got to do that. You need to reset your targets. You need to figure out what that you got to do. Monitoring on a very frequent basis is extremely important. Of what is your and cost optimization is important, both short term, mid term, and long term. Some of these cost optimization that you might have waited have become urgent now, and that must be done. And agility in the organization would be tested, and we must talk about that. Remote communication with your customer is extremely important, and not every business is geared around it. We must learn that of how do you do that. Branding would acquire a new meaning as to traditional branding methods probably won't work. So you need to figure out what is that you do. Customer retention is a challenge. Customer acquisition will become a bigger challenge from a remote location. So that needs to be really looked at. So all this needs to be worked at, and the trust that we talked about, trust within your team, trust with your customers. How do you, in this difficult time, retain it and develop it further? I can tell you, if you reinforce it now, then you have that employee or that customer for life.
Exactly.
Difficult time, you can drive a point, if you can walk your talk about these value systems that the organization has, this is the time to demonstrate that.
Got it, sir. That is actually brilliant advice. And I think the last question, at least for today, from my side, and there are many questions, but I have to keep it short for the sake of time. Is any books that you recommend to people to read? We all have a lot of time these days with the lockdown. So any books that you recommend to young business people such as us? This question is for both of you. So both of you can answer one by one. Mr. Babel, if you can answer.
So, book or reading is your personal choice. I won't prescribe one or the other. It depends on what your challenges and how much time you've got. For instance, I would read a lot about what businesses are trying to do and address, and what is the learning that globally people have.
Correct.
So, but that's been an ongoing thing. I'll tell you one of the things that my reading goes about is, I learned one thing, that every day I must acquire a new skill. I must learn something new. So today I've heard Mr. Dangach, I've learned something new from him.
Correct, sir.
Or from your questions, I learned something. When I talk to my grandchildren, I learn something new. So one of the things is, reading should be focused about what is it new that I want to learn. So first decide what is that I want to, and go into reading about that. Because there are very few problems that somebody else has not thought about. Let me tell you, somebody around the world, people have thought about the problems that you're trying to address. So there may be learning from and reading focused towards that would be extremely helpful.
Mr. Dangach, you're on mute.
No. I'm not on mute. No, I'm
okay.
very much there. Well, I would like to comment to you that everybody must read Peter Drucker. Please appreciate that the management science or management as a discipline has had a lot of contribution from the doyen Peter Drucker. Very simple, very easy, and he has written it all across. This is something which I think everybody must do. One of the maxims, one of the quotes from him, that the difference between success and failure is that between good management and bad management. That's all. Every success is ascribed to good management. Today we are having, for example, post or COVID-19. If we are able to manage, this time well, which means that we learn new things, we maybe try to think about what all we should not be doing, we should be doing. Once we come out of it, then naturally we will be able to put to good use. I would also like to tell you that such tough times obviously teach you a lot. They will pass. I mean, it's 2 months or 3 months, but you need not get very dejected. Think about what all can be done. It's a time of creative destruction. You'll have to get quite a few things. destruction is taking place. At the same time, there are all kinds of creative opportunities that are available. Every destruction. For example, in the field of education, in the field of health, everywhere there are immense opportunities. For a person like me, I have thought of giving shape to 4 different kinds of enterprises that I would like to do right now, or maybe soon after. Maybe I come out of this particular crisis. So this is a huge time for introspection, visualizing what you can do, what you are good at, and how do you like to tap. So use your time well. 2 or 3 months is not a very, very long period. In a business's, say kind of history or business life. Your business is 10 years, 20 years, you are already having a span. So try to understand what all can be done, and then be ready, be invigorated, be maybe healthy to take on the things the moment it opens up.
Great. Thanks. I think I learned something new amongst many other things, and that is creative disruption. On that note, I think I would like to thank sincerely both our panelists, Mr. Dangayaj and Mr. Babel, for spending so much time and also making the effort to come and talk to us. I think it's been a very, very inspirational talk for us at this moment in time. On that note, I will hand it over to our president of BNI Olympus, Mr. Dhiren Goyal, to basically summarize and close today's session. Once again, thank you.
Thank you, Karan. Thank you, Mr. Babel and Mr. Dangayaj, for taking us through your journey. Very, like Karan mentioned, it is very inspirational to a lot of us. Hope we can take away a few good points from it and implement in our business. On behalf of the BNI Olympus chapter, and once again, I would like to thank you, both of you. Thank you once again, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I make a request, Karan?
Yes,
sir. Yes, sir. Please.
Since you are a networking organization, I like to be networked with some of your members, and if in any manner I can contribute, I would be happy to do that. So if anybody is coming to Udaipur, give me a call. I'll keep the social distance and meet that person whenever you're supposed to travel. Okay? So good to interact with young people.
Thank you so much. Thank you very, very much.
एक खाली इकबाल का शेर पढ़ता हूँ लास्ट में. दिलों में हो जो वलवला तो डाल दोगे जलजला, वो सामने है मरहला, वहीं पहुंच के सांस लो, बड़े चलो.
Thank you.
Thank you all, sir. Thank you, sir.